Today, being Gay Pride weekend, I wanted to talk on the brotherhood of man, that spiritual principle of the brotherhood of man. And so, for all of you, what is it to be a spiritualist? And that's what our principles are about. And that's why I'm talking about our principles. All the religions of the world talk about heaven, but spiritualism is the only one that has given proof of the continuity of life. And that is what we in science call the survival of consciousness. And spiritualism does this through the demonstration of mediumship. And so that's why I love mediumship, and that's why I do it, and that's why I studied it as a scientist. All the other religions have not demonstrated this, but instead they proffer some pre-assumed method of earning heaven. And spiritualism is the only religion which realizes that everyone survives death, and that eternal life is not only everyone's, but that it also cannot be avoided by anyone. And in that heaven, we will have to each examine what we did in this life. And for those who heard my prior presentation on the principle of personal responsibility on June 14th, I delivered that one. We discovered in personal responsibility that all there is love, like the Beatles say in their song, all there is love. And if you want, you can go on our Celebrate Life Spiritualist Community YouTube channel, and you can pick that up from June 14th. We're now putting these that we film on Zoom, we're putting them on our YouTube channel so that you can pick up what you missed if you missed one of these. So the principle of the brotherhood of man is discussed in American spiritualism in the sixth principle of the National Spiritualist Association of Churches. And in the UK and the British Commonwealth, it's the second principle of the Spiritualist National Union, the SNU. And internationally, it appears as the fourth principle of the International Spiritualist Federation. And the NSAC defines this sixth principle saying, we believe that the highest morality is contained in the golden rule, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. The SNU makes that a very simple statement. We recognize the brotherhood of man. But then elsewhere, they expand this principle and they say, we are all part of the universal creative force and therefore one family in God. The operation of true brotherhood throughout the world would create betterment to the lives of many, bringing equality, security, and peace. And spiritualists try to understand the needs of others and help all people regardless of race, color, or creed. And that was written in 1964, so it doesn't say in sexual orientation and so forth, all the terms we would use today to be politically correct, but it means the same thing. And the International Spiritualist Federation alludes to this brotherhood in their fourth principle, which states, quote, we recognize communication between individual human spirits and different levels of life. Well, in that one, they're also talking about mediumship and a whole bunch of things. So it kind of gets lost in there, but they're speaking of all the dimensions of consciousness at once. So we're a brotherhood in spirit, but we're a brotherhood in the physical as well. So in a more practical sense, what is it that all this really saying to us here today in the physical? And this was well defined a while back when the Spiritualist Association of Philadelphia first began to organize in 1864. Now, when they wrote this, their sixth principle, they said, the human race is one family or brotherhood whose interests are forever inseparable. And hence it is the duty of each individual not only to refrain from whatever would wrong or harm another person, but to live for the good of all, seeking especially to aid the unfortunate, the ignorant, the inharmonious, and the suffering of whatever race or condition. Now, this was written in the last days of the Civil War here in the United States. after the battles of Shiloh and Vicksburg and Gettysburg, when many of our American young men had been slaughtered, and they were beginning to realize that Johnny was not coming marching home again. Consequently, they saw with much more clarity what life means than we manage today in our seat-belted, bubble-wrapped, hide from the pandemic, overprotected, distracted world with so much vying for our attention. We don't see that death, so suddenly COVID comes along and everybody's, they're worried it might die. Well, and after the Civil War, they realized you might die for a lot of reasons. But this is the reality. Each of us is individually responsible for the welfare of the world in which we live. We create its welfare or its misery. And just as it says in the NSAC's 7th principle about the moral responsibility of individuals, where it says, quote, "We affirm the moral responsibility of individuals and that we make our own happiness or unhappiness as we obey or disobey nature's physical and spiritual laws." That's what it's like. And as an adolescent, I was taught the 4th Scout law. A scout is a friend to all and a brother to every other scout. But whenever I would put this into practice, the cynics around me would say, "Oh, don't be a fool." So how does one go about being a brother and creating brotherhood in our politically correct modern world? Thomas Grimshaw, former trustee from 1903 to 1925 and vice president of the NSAC from 1925 to 1938, said, "Spiritualism is a religion that consists of doing good and acting honestly toward one another. A religion not of forms and ceremonies, not of long prayers and long faces, but a religion of kindness and justice and good works. A religion that will make life brighter and more livable and will bring back smiles to the lips and happiness to the souls of all who understand and live up to its teachings." Hudson Tuttle, an early seer in spiritualism, stated about brotherhood that spirit is the reality and individualized spirit is the highest type of creation. And in this sense, humankind becomes brethren, commencing and continuing their progress on the same plane of development. And in this sense, all humans are divine and are endowed with infinite capabilities. So when considering brotherhood, it's good to remember the several natural laws that flow out of the spiritualist principle of compensation and retribution. The NSAC's 7th principle and the SNU's 6th principle, both of which merely state that the natural law of cause and effect, or you reap what you sow, and the natural law of equity, which is as follows, quote, "The law of equity, in the hereafter, we must account for what we did not know and for what we should have learned. We must also account for what we did and for what we should have done." And that brings us to the natural law of tolerance that states, "We must allow others the freedom of selecting their own pathway in life. It's their journey, not ours." And these work hand in hand with the natural law of allowing. And the law of allowing is, while we are the judge and jury of our own thoughts and actions, but are not in the position to determine that which is right or wrong for another, we must therefore refrain from judging others. Everyone has the opportunity to make their own choices. And all of this continually brings us back to the natural law of cause and effect. you reap what you sow, which is beautifully stated in the following proverb. If you plant honesty, you will reap trust. If you plant goodness, you will reap friends. If you plant humility, you will reap greatness. If you plant perseverance, you will reap contentment. If you plant consideration, you will reap perspective. If you plant hard work, you will reap success. If you plant forgiveness, you will reap reconciliation. The natural law of compensation and retribution is mentioned again and again by all the sages of history, including Jesus. And it's about justice and charity and equity. And it rules the universe. Now, this is what brotherhood means: seeing all others as equals. Not that we are our brother's keeper, but that we are his friend, his or her friend. And finally, it's most fitting here today in this great city of San Francisco, excuse me, the city which is the true heart of all the Golden West, to close with the prayer of our city's patron saint, St. Francis of Assisi, which speaks about brotherhood and what it clearly means. This is St. Francis' prayer. Lord, make me an instrument of thy peace. Where there is hatred, let me sow love. Where there is injury, let me sow pardon. Where there is discord, let me sow unity. Where there is doubt, let me sow faith. Where there is error, let me sow truth. Where there is despair, let me sow hope. Where there is sadness, let me sow joy. Where there is darkness, let me sow light. O divine Master, grant that I may not so much seek to be consoled as to console, to be understood as to understand, to be loved as to love. For it is in giving that we receive. It is in pardoning that we are pardoned. And it is in dying that we are born to eternal life. Thank you.